ठंडा हो गया यार. Okay, hi guys. What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome to the yet another episode of the Wednesday podcast with me, Abhinav Arora. Today, I have a very special guest with me. Before I tell you anything about them, I need you to like this video, subscribe if you haven't, and press this infamous or famous bell icon if you haven't yet. So in the last episode, we spoke about how do you make a crore, how do you possibly make a crore, in the Indian startup ecosystem by playing your job hunting plus equity game right or ESOP game right. Today, I want to deviate from that path. I still want to talk about, making good wealth, but we're going to look at the big tech. What do I mean by the big tech? I'm talking about Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, even Microsoft and Google landing a job at the big tech, and getting your fortunes right. What's the career path to land into the big tech? And I have a very special guest. More about him after the intro. Follow your passion might be a perfect question to ask and might have a perfect answer when interpreted right.
Let's start tracking which stocks can actually go up and go down, or which stocks have an advantage with the vaccine coming out.
Why it would have been more expensive to fake a moon landing back in those days. It's quite an interesting video to watch.
The economic activity created from the App Store alone is worth $500 billion.
So let's move on to the next question.
Man, it was too easy.
Too easy, no? Why didn't you answer?
So, who I have with me today is a good friend. His name is Puneet Kohli. Puneet is an ML and computer vision engineer with Apple in the Silicon Valley. Can we bring Puneet on the screen? Hi, Puneet. How are we doing?
Hello. Doing good. How are you?
Very fine. Puneet, okay, I think we've had the chance to do our pleasantries off the camera, but right now I want to dive deep into the question that we are here to explore. That is, what does the career path of an employee at Avalon? Avalon is something that I've spoken a lot about, but today we're going to talk about Amazon and Apple and Facebook and Netflix and Microsoft and Google, because you've landed yourself a job at Apple. A lot of people aspire, and this is across the globe. This is not just India. A lot of people aspire to land a job there. So what has been your career path? That, not to forget that you're also a mentor with FaangPath, and you're helping, I think you've already helped hundreds of people, calibrate their path to one of these jobs. So what does it take? Can you talk about why the aspirational level is so high, and then what does it take to get to these jobs?
Yeah. So why the aspirational level is so high? I think we should address that first, right?
Sure.
A lot of people, when they look for jobs opportunities, or they're just graduating or about to graduate, you'll see a common set of questions and themes in their mindset, right? One is, should I do A, technology, or B, technology, if they're trying to pursue a technology career? Or should I this company is paying less, but should I work there? Or should I work at like a service-based company? I don't know how the work is going to be. And you'll find these common set of questions. And then so in that theme, the aspirational level of working at these companies is very high. Number one, because if you work at these companies, right, there's a very positive social status attached to it. So for me, for example, when I work at Apple, people immediately think of iPhones, think of MacBooks, and they relate me with those things, right? So now, because the society value of these products is very positive, my outlook becomes positive. Similar for anyone who works at Google, like Netflix, like people look at these products in an inspired way and like, wow, I wish I knew how that worked, that product which like makes my life 100x easier. I just search something and results pop up. Or the company that makes Android, things like this, or the company that makes AWS, which powers like 60% of the internet backend. So there's a very positive social status attached to it. That's number one, why it's very aspirational. Number two is that the questions which come up around, will the work be good, will the pay be good, and blah blah blah, or will the technology used be good, all those questions are kind of thrown away at these companies, at top tech companies. You basically have this notion, or you get a very strong kind of reference point around the work culture, around the pay, and around the peers. So all three of these things.
What do you mean by the reference point?
So good catch there. What I mean is like, basically, if you kind of think of things as like like a range, right? So bottom of the barrel, like I'm doing work for free, and top of the barrel, I'm getting a lot of money to do what I'm doing. So there's always, you're somewhere in between that range. So when you work at a top tech company, you're at least, not guaranteed per se, but like you have a very high confidence that you're somewhere at the top of that range, compared to, if you take a like distribution of every other person around you. Same thing with the quality of work. Like arguably, if I wanted to work at, say, Netflix, I have in my mind in advance, I know what kind of things Netflix is doing. And so I will, get a general sense of, okay, like if I work as, for example, a software engineer at Netflix, like these are the potential problems I might work at. Versus if I join a very small, service-based company, which is like walking distance from my home, the question arises is like, what is the quality of the work? Like, will I be supporting like 20-year-old, whatever system, right? So these kind of questions, you kind of get thrown out of the window when you work at top tech companies. And the third is about the peers. You might have heard, and a lot of aspirational people like that people look up to kind of talk about learning when you work, right? And oftentimes the learning isn't coming from like a textbook or anything like that. It's mostly coming from the people around you. And so just working at these companies, by virtue of the people around you being so smart and being in kind of the same, environment that you're in, it's just like a much higher quality of work compared to, again, like the reference point is, say, that random service company that's down the street from your house. And that's kind of, the second part of it. And the third part, which not many people talk about, is just that they're like extremely hard to get into. The acceptance rate at some of these companies is like, and I've read these statistics online, is like less than 0.2%.
Wow.
So they're just like extremely hard to get to. So it's like, first, everybody knows about these companies. You don't need to explain to someone where you work. Second is like, if you work there, you're getting positive net benefit in multiple ways. And third is like 1 and 2 assumes that you can actually get in.
Got it. So
that's why there's a high aspirational value.
So I'll quickly summarize, what you just threw at me when it comes to the aspirations of the aspirational value in these companies. The last one was the scarcity. That, okay, if only 0.2% get in, I want to be a part of those 0.2. Another one is fat paychecks. You're not wondering that if I'm getting paid well, because these companies are anyway doing well, they're paying you well, and you're guaranteed a fat paycheck. Third thing is the social status. I work at Netflix. There's a sense of pride that that you get. It's an emblem that you attach to your name when you go out in social situations. What do you do? Oh, I work with Netflix. I work with Apple. And I think you can say this because you felt the feeling. Another thing is quality of work. You know that the work is quality work. It's not outdated tech. It's not And then these are companies that are producing the best of tech products in the world. They're one of the fastest growing giants, and so the work and the technology is best. And then there's something that I picked up from one of the events that I attended yesterday, which you also briefly mentioned, that what's happening with these big companies, it's a sort of a network effect. What do I mean by network effect is, when one side of this thing increases, the other side also increases, and that it's sort of a loop. So I think where that is playing in here is when good companies pay well. They have a nice ecosystem. They have smart people. And what do humans at the base level want? They want a fat paycheck and they want a nice company. So they've already attracted the smartest folks that are causing growth in these companies. And the more these companies grow, more smart folks come in. And and then it's a flywheel that one thing grows the other. So
Right.
that's something I picked up yesterday. I could easily relate to when you said this thing today, that okay, people want to be around smartest folks, and that's the value add they bring, and they learn from the smartest folks around them. This learning curve doesn't come via books; it comes via the ecosystem that you work in. Fantastic. So. Okay, the second question was, how do you get into that? I want to understand that on a personal level, Puneet. How did your journey start and end up at Apple?
Yeah. So I mean, I've to say the least, I've had a very like non-traditional journey compared to many people who end up being job seekers. I started my journey as an entrepreneur. So during my undergrad years, I had a company along with some of my people at my university. We actually started a company. We were making BlackBerry 10 games and apps. Many people watching this might not even remember that BlackBerry used to have a phone and its own ecosystem, but we used to make apps and games for that platform, and we were doing pretty well. One thing led to another, and then we shut down the startup, and then I took up a job at a finance hedge fund company as a software engineer. And then I kind of decided I want to study further, so I did my bachelor's, and I decided to study further. So I came back to the US and I did my master's. And somewhere along the way, I got an opportunity to work at Amazon. And so I did that for a little bit. But my personal interest was more around machine learning and computer vision. And so at Amazon, I was doing more of, back-end software engineering, which was crazy because I was working at they say there's scale and then there's like Amazon scale. So when you make a single product at Amazon, like you start with, okay, what if the moment I launch this product, we have like 10 billion users? Now what? And so that's like the day-to-day conversation, right? So it's like Amazon scale operations, which was a great thing to learn, I believe. Jumped to a startup where I spent almost 2 years in machine learning, computer vision. And then more recently, I joined back at Apple as a computer vision machine learning engineer. In terms of, if you see my journey, I've like switched every time from like startup to big company, startup to big company, startup to big company.
Is that switch mandatory?
Is it mandatory? No, I wouldn't say so at all. Like I said,
your trajectory has been something like this. Okay, I was an entrepreneur, then I did this, then I did this, and then I did this. So, I mean, I think you're somewhere in the mid of your career, and after having switched a lot of jobs, is that a very familiar career trajectory that you see around your peers, or that's not what most of the folks have pursued to get where they're at in Apple?
Yeah, so I would say my trajectory is somewhat unique. Most people that I've seen in and around me, especially in the Silicon Valley, they'll mostly will do like their master's degree, get a job at a company, and then stay with that company for 2-3 years before switching to another company. And somewhere along the way, in the Valley, people want to obviously work at big companies. So somewhere along the way, they'll try to get a job at Google, Amazon, Apple. And obviously there's many more big companies here. There's like Snap, there's Uber, Lyft, Airbnb. Like these are all great companies to work at. So aspirationally, internally, people want to at least work at these companies once. And it gives you a nice brand value as well, right? Like, hey, I used to work at so-and-so. Like, I don't know if you've heard, but like the ex-Google engineer is more valuable nowadays than the actual Google engineer. In terms of
and I can see that I can see why that happens, to be honest, and I think that applies not just to Google, to a lot of other companies as well. It's just how the industry functions. But okay, for the purpose, or for the for the focus of my audience is mostly freshers landing their first jobs, and 90% of these folks are based in India. So how does an Indian who's about 21 year old, either aspirant of a big tech company or currently, writing resumes for big tech companies, what do you advise them? What is the Indian ecosystem like? Do the FAANG companies exist in India? I know about Amazon and Microsoft being prevalent in Hyderabad and Bangalore, but what's the ecosystem here? How do you land a big tech job in India as a fresher?
Yeah, so as a fresher, right, there's two ways. And the number one way which most freshers are at least aware of to some degree is that there's this concept of like on-campus placement. So these companies will come to your university and basically like, hand feed jobs to you. And they'll be like, okay, look, we've come to this university. Here's the test. Here's, the procedure. And like, we'll choose N candidates to take with us to work with. So that's the way number one. And I can talk more about, the challenges and how to navigate that thing as well. But then way number two, which is more applicable, especially to, the vast majority of students, because this on-campus opportunity is only for like the top maybe 10 universities in India. And then every company just has like their favorites.
It's less than top 10, to be honest.
Is it? Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, but every company like chooses their favorites. For example, I know Microsoft has like this huge hiring spree at Manipal for whatever reason. And so
but Google doesn't.
And Amazon, and Google doesn't, and
Yet
Amazon
folks
doesn't.
get into
and so,
Google.
Yeah. And so you ask the question is how, right? And that comes to the other part, which is you can actually apply to jobs at these companies, even as a fresher, or even, if you're experienced, you can yourself go and apply to jobs at these companies. And that's actually the part that I don't think many people realize is possible. And even if they know it's possible, like they don't understand what the process is to do that, and what do I as the candidate, like what do I need to do to make myself visible to those companies, right? Like what are the steps involved?
Pens and paper out. Okay, tell me how does that process work?
Yeah. So I mean, a vast majority of it is really like, and let me take a step back and say, like, think of it like this. You're trying to get viewed or seen by someone who doesn't know you, who's never heard of you before. And there's like tens of thousands of people, presumably with equal or better or, slightly worse skills than you. Think of it, if it doesn't make sense till now, like think of it as like you're all trying to be Shah Rukh Khan, but there's only like, so many people that can become the next Shah Rukh Khan. But there's like, like if you ask how many people are in Mumbai every, month or week trying to become an actor, there's like hundreds of thousands of them, right? So it's very similar in a sense. The good news is there's like more than one company and hence more than one opportunity. And it's not like you need some crazy exceptional skills to do it. It's something that anyone can do. It's just a matter of knowing it. So coming back now, what's required mainly is telling your story. And how do you tell your story to someone in this like job process? And most of that comes from, at the application stage is like having a very good resume. And the resume now, a lot of people will say, oh, I made this resume in this, particular format that my college provided me. And like, what do I do with this like crap junk piece of paper? And that's like the most common thing I've heard. But if you use it correctly, it's not a junk piece of paper, right? It's actually I would say like a very formal, like almost like not legal, but like kind of a legal document in the sense where like if you treat it that way with the same amount of care, like it can do wonders for you. So, and obviously that's kind of, what we're going to be talking about in depth at the Pro League workshop that we're doing.
Ooh, okay. So link for that is in the description. Puneet's coming over. He's partnered with us. In fact, Puneet's company FaangPath, Puneet's a mentor with FaangPath while he's working with Apple. He's partnered with us and he's rolling a workshop on how do you get your resumes right, how do you get your resume story, career narrative right. But no highlights that you can share from that. Is it
I was going to share that, yeah.
Okay.
So then let's say, I'll put like example A, example B.
Sure.
So example A is the resume that you made with your college format. So on the top, there's your like, standard passport size photo that you pasted there. And then you have your name, and then you have like my ninth grade marks is this, my 10th grade marks is this, my 12th grade marks is this, and then my GPA is so and so. And then you wrote like 4 pages of like stuff about yourself. And I'm not just making this up. Like 90% of the resumes that
We've seen
I've
that
helped
too.
people change, I've seen it, right? Like I even now if I like ask people to send their resume to me, and like 90% of resumes will look like this. So statistically, that's what I'm saying. So that's example A of your resume. So when I, on the other side, right, of this screen, you've submitted this online to my company, and I look at this piece of paper, like it's telling me almost no useful information about you. Like I know that if you've done an engineering degree, like you've done one course in algorithms, one course in blah blah blah, and like sure, you've passed your 10th grade, you've passed your 12th grade, and you got some marks. That's why you're at whatever university you're at. And like there's all this useless information on that piece of paper that's provided to me by most candidates. Now on the other hand, I have candidate B, right? Candidate B went through the effort of making a very polished resume, which actually tells their story. So looking at a resume, here's what I should be able to tell. I should be able to understand like what do you actually know, right? Don't tell me what all things you've done under the sun. What do you actually know? What are your like interests, right? So based on your resume, I can tell that what are some other things you've done apart from just your academics or just part-time work experience. And in your own words, can you put all this together in a document that highlights your communication skill? Like you don't need to write on your resume excellent communicator, verbally blah 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 something. People write all these things, but if you just make your resume good enough, that's proof that you are a good communicator. And basically it tells a story. So when I read resumes, it says, okay, this is what you're doing currently, right? And a good resume will have like 1 or 2 lines of a summary on top. And then I say, okay, well, you're currently pursuing your degree and you're looking for a job. Great. Now what? So I say, okay, well, you did an internship and then you tried your hand at some freelancing stuff. Very cool. And then you also participated in a few hackathons. Very nice. And in those hackathons, you won one of them for which you made this innovative project. Okay, cool. And then like you also tried your hand at public speaking in university, or you did some NGO work. Like when I see all of this through the resume itself, and again, this is all like within 30 seconds of looking at this piece of paper. I'm not spending hours reading every sentence that you've wrote. It gives a good idea of who you are and what you bring to the table. And as someone who's hiring new grads, the number one thing they look for is like obviously the education background and skill set. Assuming you have that, like just the X factor, like what is the X factor? And for a new grad, this could be something as simple as like they have very good communication skills, or they just shown a lot of grit, right? They've been doing things constantly through their undergrad experience, which maybe gives an indicator that when they join this company, they will also be like highly passionate, highly energetic. Or it might even be something like very specific, right? Like maybe you spent 4 years of your undergrad degree pursuing like drama club. And it could be like so specific, like your whole resume is about the drama club. But obviously you still have core skills, right? You've shown that I know how to write code if it's a software engineering role. Which is fine too, because then it shows that you are able to like deep dive on a particular topic.
Got it. Okay, so basically folks are looking to hire a holistic personality, a well-rounded, well-shaped human being who has, who talks more about, that's what your resume should at least make you look like, that who's someone who's done more than just pursued a college degree and scored an 8 or 9 or a 10 GPA in 10th. So that's a career narrative that you're going to that you're asking people to put out. And it doesn't, from what you're saying, I don't think it only applies to the big tech. It applies to any random job that you're going to get or hired for.
That's actually a very good point. And so one thing that people maybe have a misconception after I say things like this is like this only applies to big tech companies. This will help you everywhere. The only difference is it will make a larger difference in larger companies because there your competition is higher.
Right.
For example, at a startup, you may be able to get away with like drop the CEO a LinkedIn message, a really good LinkedIn message, and they'll look at your profile regardless. Like you may be able to. I'm not saying like go do that and message every startup CEO, but it's possible you can, you know, like still get opportunities with less. But when you go through this effort of like building this very polished resume, you've like, you know, it's like when you target IITs, right? You inherently also target like everything below that. So it's kind
Got
of the
it.
same concept.
Perfect, and it's kind of becomes mandatory when you're cutting through massive noise. You just said, you know, 0.02% of applicants, less than 0.02%, 0.2 or 0.02.
0.2, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, less than 0.2% of the applicants get through. Fantastic. Okay, you've covered this. Now I want to get to, you know, the wealth part of things, or rather, you know, how do I say, the compensation part of the things. What do you think these jobs pay? And I'm more or less interested in pre-30. How much, you know, what is the paycheck range for pre-30 folks in whatever roles in these companies in India? And then perhaps, you know, since you're studying in the US, you've cracked a career with Apple at US, we can also talk about, you know, how Indians get into the valley. But firstly, how much do they pay in both geographies, India and US?
Yeah. So in India, you know, my numbers are a little rusty, so I'm gonna talk like rough ranges because I don't have exact numbers
Not quoting you
anymore.
on it, don't worry.
Yeah, don't quote me on it. And like, and also like the exact numbers I've seen are a few years old. So but also, you know, in India there's one more thing to be aware before I get into the numbers, is like there's a concept of like package in India. Like what is your actual package and what is your like actual pay. So companies will quote you like this huge package, and your like parents will go crazy hearing the numbers, but your actual pay is going to be like you know, maybe like half of that or some smaller number.
Half of that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll just give my example, right, to start with.
Sure.
5 years ago now, I worked at D Shaw in India, which is in Hyderabad, and at the time they were the highest paying company for freshers in India. So my package was like 29 lakhs at the time, 5 years ago. And like I heard this and I was like, ooh, like people are making like 5 lakhs and whatnot, and like, whoa, 29, that's crazy. And like I had to like not tell people how much I was like planning to make, because, you know, I didn't want people to like get jealous or whatever. But then it turns out like that's just your like package, right? That's not your real salary. Your real that number is like your salary plus your like optional annual bonus, which you may or may not get depending on certain factors. Plus they count how much like insurance they're gonna give you, so that's just part of the package. Plus they count like, oh, by the way, we also give free food, and free food is worth like this much rupees per year. And like they you know, count like all sorts of things under the sun. And so my actual pay at the time was more like 12 or 13 lakhs. Like that was my base pay.
That's 40%.
Right? And so 40%.
Yeah.
And then on top with like bonuses and everything, it comes to maybe 50% of that. Like joining bonus, end of year bonus, yes, blah blah blah. And then so the rest of it is just like fake money, right? It's
on paper.
It's value per se. Yeah, it's not even on paper. Like I can't go and like I can't exchange free food for money.
Okay, interesting, cool.
So this is the concept of package, right? So again, when people quote their salaries in India, I still don't know to date if they're talking about their like actual salary or their package. But let's just assume one or the other and leave it as an exercise to the viewer to find out which one it is. So now I've heard since it's been like 5 years, nowadays freshers are making like anywhere from 15 to 30 like base salary. And this is a really good number, by the way, right? If you're like straight out of college, because the cost of living in India has not significantly increased. So 5 years ago and 5 years before that, and even now, the cost of living in India is like roughly, you know, linearly increasing. But the salaries have actually like almost exponentially increased. Yeah. And when I was like over the past like couple of years, I've heard some crazy salaries, which I thought was unbelievable in India. But like with a couple of years experience, people are making anywhere like 60 lakhs, 70 lakhs. things like that. And this is obviously at the top tech companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, because there's fierce competition. LinkedIn was also in India, and then they were acquired by Microsoft, but LinkedIn was also paying crazy. Uber also pays very heavily in India, is what I've heard. And then the other aspect is, of course, like if you just find, and this is more of what you spoke last week with Abhinav, is around like startups, right? If you can join a very hot, like moonshot project at a very like early and critical phase of the project's life cycle, then you're talking big money there too. So I would say like, between 20 to 30 in India, it's not unreasonable anymore to think about, getting to that 1 crore mark, even if you're just working as a salaried employee. And again, if you're working at like, so you've talked about startups last week, so we understand that. But if you're working at a larger tech company, a good part of this will come from your stock component. So just for context, most big companies like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, etc., they will provide you a component of the salary, which is a stock component, which means, companies are traded in the stock market. So you can like even now go and buy a stock of the company. And if the company does well, the stock price will increase and you can sell the stock and you will basically profit the difference. So when you work at these companies, they will just hand you stock every year as part of your salary. And so what happens is, even though when you join, let's say you got just for example 10 lakhs of stock, and over the course of 3 or 4 or 5 years, however long you worked at that company, the stock price of that company increased by 6 or 7 times. So now the 10 lakh which you got 5 years ago is now worth 70 lakh, assuming you just kept the stock. Plus along the way you got some dividends, which is a different concept that I'm not going to talk about.
So let me quickly
and
summarize. I think it might become a little too much to digest. And correct me if I'm wrong. 20 to 30 lakh is the norm when you get hired at a big tech in India as a fresher, and within a couple of years you can increase that to 60 to 70 lakhs. Right, with a couple of years of experience. Okay, and then you said that the stock game here, they also give you stock options. And in fact, they pay a part of your salary in stocks. But here the deal is different, is because you don't need these companies to buy back the stock for them to liquidate for you for that paper money to become real cash. Amazon is listed publicly, Microsoft is listed publicly. You can legit, the moment you get the stocks, perhaps the next day you can go and exchange it for real money. This is as good as real cash. So here that is that's almost as good as cash, because these are publicly listed companies and you can again trade the very next day. So look at stock option differently than you would look at it as startups. But these companies don't grow as rapidly. I mean, I do see when you and I were chatting about Amazon made a few crore-patis out of 20 years old in the last 5 years in India, because Amazon stock grew 7 times in the last 5 years. So maybe we perhaps talk about what's the value in the stocks, and are people keeping it, and what does it mean, and then we can segue into the US market and how to get there.
Yeah, again, right, like I think you summarized it very well in terms of the overall concept and ideas behind this stuff. But so big company stock is actually like publicly traded stock. You can go and buy it now if you want, and the stock that they give you now, that's yours to keep. You can do whatever you want with it. So one way is, like, for example, if you joined Amazon 5 years ago and you just held on to that stock, and as of today, you would have had 7 times that amount. But there could have been someone, which it's a very reasonable thing to do as well, which is they just sold their stock at the end of the year and used, got cash and used the cash, or, got the cash or invested that money in some other thing. So obviously anything is possible. I would say just like game of numbers, like, majority of the people would at least keep the stock for some amount of time. And there's tax advantages to doing that. But yeah, and why this is different than startups is, with startups, like, and I don't think you guys talked about this last time with Abhinav, but only 1 in 10 startups like actually succeed. right? So that means if you're working 2 years at a startup, you have a 10% chance of like making that big money. And obviously we're saying Amazon was like 7x over 5 years, but startups is like maybe 10, 20, 30x, 40x over even a much smaller time frame.
Dude, they become
sometimes.
100x in 5 years.
Yeah, anything's possible. Like the sky is the limit. And so, but the probability of that happening is not 100%, right? You may work at a startup and like 2 years later, bankrupt, you don't have a job, and all that like paper money you got is worth zero. With a bigger company, your risk is very limited because this is already a publicly traded company. And again, we're talking only of like the top tech companies. So these are like companies that public as a whole believe in. Like you want to work at this company because you believe in the product, you've used their product, you use it every day. I'm using an iPhone to record this, right? Like things like that. And so you're not like risking that component of your salary, right? You're saying, okay, this stock, I know it's worth something, and your hope is that it will be worth some multiplier soon, but just not like 100x, more like 2x, 3x, 5x.
Fair enough. Okay, that's a very fair idea. Now, something that the audience also wants to know, and that this has kind of become the American dream of Indians. It's the Indian American dream that we want to go and get settled in the US, and the best case would be to work at the Silicon Valley. How does that happen? How do you get a job as an Indian? How do you get a job at the big tech in the US? What's that process?
Yeah. So straight to it, the simplest way and the way that most people will end up following is that you do a degree in the US, through which you can work for some number of years in the US. And then once you start working at a company, you can apply for like a more permanent type of work permit, which then allows you to work longer in the US. So that's the way that most people will end up following inevitably. And the benefit is you also get a master's degree, which I know you don't think very highly of, but
in certain fields, yes, but in certain fields, perhaps. I mean, if you need ML and you have a good ecosystem for that, perhaps the kinds that Ivy Leagues give you, then sure. Yeah. And for MD, of course. But again, here we're talking about the tech, so yes, sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one way. And then whether you're doing your master's degree just to get a job in the US, or like you actually want to learn or whatever, that's a totally different topic. But that's one way of doing it. The other way is, which people end up learning once they start working, is that many of these larger tech companies who have offices in India, they also allow you to come work for them in their US or other international offices. And so there's a process for that. Like for example, in Amazon, I believe, don't quote me on this, but you have to like work at Amazon India for 3 years, and then you can start this process.
Yeah, you can go to Seattle.
And the process is, so it's pretty simple actually. I have a couple of friends who've done this. Is you just start looking for teams in Seattle who are like trying to hire people, and so you talk to the manager or whatever. If they like you and they think you're a good fit, then they will like do the paperwork to bring you over. So that's the other way. These are like the two major ways you can work in the US. So either you just start working in India for a company that has a US presence and they can bring you to the US, or you study in the US, you become a student, and then you can like work in the US after that.
Okay, so work for a big tech in India could be Amazon, could be Microsoft, could be Google. Okay, Now I want to understand again the pay question in US. What's the pay like there? Let's say I think you get there as an Indian, you'll find most of these guys landing there at their earliest at 23, 24. And what's their next 4 or 5 years looking like?
Yeah. So in the US, it's one thing to note is, it's kind of funny, but it's true, is like California versus the rest of US, like there's this huge pay difference. So like whatever number you see on the internet of what people are getting paid in California is like significantly different than all other 49 states of the United States.
It's much higher?
It's much higher. And it's just because the tax is much higher and the cost of living is like insanely higher. So I lived in Texas for a bit, and my 6 months rent in Texas, so I could stay in Texas for 6 months, is what I pay here on like a monthly basis. So like that's how different it is in terms of cost of living. But let's just say, for the sake of discussion, most people like statistically will end up working in California because this is where most of the companies are, their headquarters are. Big companies, startups, mid-size, everyone's here for the most part. And it's also easy to like talk about California and then you just scale everything down from there. So to start with, right, like let's say you just did your master's degree or bachelor's degree as well, and you landed a job at a decent company. On average, I want to say like a fresher would get maybe $120,000, which is somewhere like 70 to 80 lakhs, depending on the
But I
conversion
don't
rate.
think there's no use comparing
Yeah, there's no
INR
use
to
comparing.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what I was gonna say. I'm just comparing so that you didn't have to in your mind, whoever's watching. But that's the like absolute number. But then you factor in things like cost of living, and you factor in the tax situation and whatnot and everything. So it's less. And then that the 120 I'm talking about is like the salary that you would get in hand. Apart from that, depending on the company, you would get a stock as well. So the stock can be like 25 to 50K per year kind of thing. So on top of the 120. And then there might be some small bonus and whatnot. And then as you progress, but then you start progressing faster, right? So maybe within like 3 to 4 years, you can easily be in like the 250 to 300 kind of range. Within a couple more years, things start like growing fast here, especially at higher levels. What happens in Silicon Valley is I'm not there yet, so I'm not saying this from experience, but at like much higher levels at these companies, there's like this variable stock performance bonus. So there's a Medium post that I read recently where this guy, like his first year salary at Facebook was like 180, including the stock. Second year was 200 and something. Third year was 200 and something. Fourth year shot up to like 500 because like he got this crazy bonus from Facebook. And then every year after that, he kept getting like almost like $1 million worth of just bonus.
You're saying
at Facebook.
Facebook is dumping stocks worth $500,000 and $1 million per year on their employees.
At least that's what that one person quoted
Wow.
in their article. Yeah. And so, I mean, that happens as you grow with the company, right? And so this is also excluding the fact that the Facebook stock was also growing on its own
Yeah.
in this time frame.
Right.
Uh,
And it's an easier
yeah.
option sometimes to, for the employer to give a component of something that's just grown as fast instead of giving cash away.
Yeah. Stock is always, employers prefer giving stock because it also incentivizes you to keep staying at the company, right? Because
True.
they give stock over a period of time. It's not like, here's the money, take it. It's like, here's the money, take it over the next some number of years. And then you see that the stock is growing, so you want to stay there, and it's called golden handcuffs actually. That's
I didn't know that the terminology was as prevalent across the globe, because Abhinav used it the last time. He's like, okay, these are handcuffs, but they're made of gold, and I don't want to take them off because they're gold. So yeah, got it. Okay, now Puneet, I want to ask you, this question because of you mentioned the last video that we did, pretty often. And in the last video, if you saw, we cracked the framework, the 3 H's: hacker, hipster, and the hustler. The 3 roles. Hacker is an engineering guy. Hipster is the UI UX guy. I would say human computer interface guy. And the third is the product/growth manager. So they're basically shaping, they're aligning the entire orchestra and making sense of it for the rest of the world, or ensuring distribution. So what you specifically spoke about engineering role because you're an engineer, but do these patterns and your workshop with us, does all of this apply to other roles as well? And can you name a few of them?
Yeah, for sure. So I obviously speak more about engineering just because it's easier for me to talk about it through experience. But in terms of who is a good fit for like this workshop or doing this thing. It's anyone who like wants to work in like the tech industry. So again, you can be a hacker, which means engineering. You can be a hustler, so growth, product, marketing, sales, anything of that sort, or the third one, which was the hipster, and you could be an aspiring designer or UX person. And all of these, again, the process at applying to tech companies, the way you need to tell your story, the way you need to build your personal brand and like your personality, it's all the same, correct? Obviously, the only difference lies in what they're going to ask you in the interview and what they expect from you in terms of core skills. But the way you portray yourself, the way you tell your story, that all is pretty much the same. And so the workshop isn't only for software engineers. It's like for anyone who wants to work at these companies. That being said, obviously, because I'm an engineer, I can probably give like a edge to someone who's aspiring to be an engineer. But that's about it in terms of the difference.
Awesome. Fantastic. I think this answered all our questions, Puneet. This was